Cycling has rules. The written ones everyone knows, the unwritten ones passed down through generations, and the silent rules riders conveniently forget the moment the cameras begin to roll. These rules form the backbone of the sport: respect among rivals, honor within the peloton, and a fragile, almost sacred code that keeps hard racing from descending into pure, uncontrolled chaos. Think about it. What's the worst thing you've ever witnessed in a race? A brutal high-speed crash on a wet descent? A fistfight erupting in the middle of the peloton? A shameless act of cheating captured in crisp, unforgiving HD? Those moments may be outrageous, even shocking. But this story isn't about physical strength or tactical genius. This story is about something deeper, something far uglier: disrespect. Contador versus Armstrong, Tour de France 2009. Astana entered that year with what everyone called the dream team. At least that's what the sponsors believed when they signed the multi-million-euro checks. Alberto Contador, the defending Tour champion, explosive in the mountains, ice-cold under pressure, and widely regarded as the next great ruler of Grand Tours, was meant to be the undisputed leader. And then came Lance Armstrong, seven-time Tour winner, cycling icon, a legend returning from retirement with a mission to prove he was still the king of the sport, depending on which version of cycling history you choose to believe. One team, two alphas, zero peace. It was like forcing two kings to share a single throne, with the crown balanced uneasily between them. On paper, the strategy was flawless. Armstrong would support Contador, Contador would defend his title, and Astana would dominate the race with an iron grip. See, victory seemed inevitable. But on the road, where egos clash harder than handlebars, the plan fell apart immediately. From the earliest mountain tests, the tension was impossible to ignore. Armstrong watched Contador with a mix of suspicion and resentment, as if witnessing a rival trying to steal not just the Tour, but his entire legacy. Then came Verbier, stage 15, the climb that blew up the illusion of team unity. Over the team radio, the message was clear: hold position, wait for Armstrong. But Contador didn't wait, not even for a second. He rose out of the saddle, unleashed a blistering acceleration, and attacked with the kind of fury only a rider trying to reclaim control of his destiny can deliver. He didn't just drop the entire field, he dropped his own teammate, the legend he was supposedly meant to protect. It wasn't just a tactical attack, it was a declaration of independence, a line drawn in the asphalt. And after the stage, the war that had been simmering suddenly went public. Armstrong, visibly irritated, told reporters that Contador was not a real champion. When asked if he was surprised by the attack, Armstrong's ice-cold answer cut like a knife. That wasn't really the plan. Contador, ever composed, responded with diplomatic smiles, but every sentence carried a hidden blade. In team meetings, the tension was thick enough to slice. On the podium, they stood shoulder to shoulder, smiling for the cameras while seething behind their mirrored sunglasses. Two champions, trapped in a rivalry neither of them could escape. The Tour de France had seen many battles before, but rarely had the real war been fought inside the same team bus. Tour de Pologne 2020. Stage 1 was supposed to be routine, a classic opening sprint, flat and predictable, the kind of finish teams rehearse dozens of times a season. Fast, yes. Intense, of course, but safe. Instead, that day turned into one of the darkest and most disturbing moments modern cycling has ever witnessed. Speed, nearly 60 kilometers per hour. Road, narrower than any had right to be for a World Tour sprint. Tension, off the charts. As the riders tore down the final straight, The sprinters locked elbows, shoulders, and handlebars in a desperate fight for position. In those final seconds, a single movement can decide victory or disaster. Dylan Groenewegen drifted just slightly, barely a shoulder's width, into Fabio Jakobsen's line. Under normal circumstances, it might have been nothing. But at that speed, on that road, with the barriers angled inwards, it was catastrophic. Jakobsen was forced into the metal fencing at full speed. He hit head first. The barriers didn't bend, they detonated. Metal shards flew across the road. Entire sections of fencing ripped loose and rocketed into race officials, knocking them to the ground as if caught in an explosion. Riders behind crashed into the wreckage with no chance to react. The finish line turned into chaos. When the dust finally settled, Jakobsen lay motionless, his bike destroyed, his face unrecognizable from the impact. Medics worked urgently, the entire peloton standing in shocked silence. He was airlifted to the hospital in critical condition, fighting for his life. In the days that followed, cycling reeled. The UCI banned Groenewegen for 9 months, a formal punishment, but one that couldn't erase the images burned into the sport's memory. Riders didn't just call it reckless, many called it a betrayal of trust, the kind that shatters more than bodies. The peloton depends on an unspoken pact. Respect your rivals, protect each other's lives at high speed. That day in Poland, that pact was broken, and the consequences rippled far beyond the finish line. Vuelta a España 2014. Stage 16 began like any other mid-race mountain day. Long miles, rising tension, and the usual nervous shuffling for position. No one watching could predict that within minutes, it would become one of the most unbelievable scenes ever captured live on a cycling broadcast. At first, it was the standard chaos of the peloton, elbows out, handlebars brushing, riders shouting for space as the road narrowed. Nothing unusual. Every rider knows that the fight for position can get physical. Leaning, nudging, even a bit of aggressive shoulder work. It's part of the unwritten language of cycling. But then the fuse lit. Giovanni Brambilla, clearly irritated by what he saw as dangerous riding, lashed out with a punch. Not a shove, a real punch. Ivan Rovny, stunned for a split second, retaliated with one of his own. Suddenly, 2 professional athletes, trained to climb mountains and sprint for glory, not brawl, were throwing punches at 40 kilometers per hour, surrounded by cyclists who had no idea whether to intervene, keep racing, or simply stay out of the line of fire. It was surreal, almost absurd, like watching a bar fight transplanted into the middle of a Grand Tour stage. Commentators were speechless, viewers worldwide were stunned, and the peloton itself barely knew how to react. The danger was immediate. One bad swing, one missed punch, and half the riders around them could have gone down in a pile of broken bikes and broken bones. In cycling, there's no written rule that says, don't fight. It doesn't need to exist. Everyone in the sport knows that certain lines are invisible but sacred. And this was one of them. Brambilla and Rovny didn't just cross that line, they leapt over it, dragging the entire stage into chaos. It was a moment that reminded the world how quickly a race can shift from disciplined competition to something far more primal and far more dangerous. Tour de France 2010, Stage 15, Port de Balais. It was one of those decisive moments that define a rider's legacy. Andy Schleck, wearing the yellow jersey and fighting for his first Tour victory, launched a perfectly timed attack on the steep gradients of the Port de Balais. He needed time on Alberto Contador, and the climb was his battleground. Then, disaster struck. Just as he surged, Schleck's chain slipped, a cruel mechanical failure at the worst possible moment. He swung off the road, helpless, cursing his luck as he fought to reset his chain. Cycling has a code of honor, older than many of the races themselves. You don't attack the race leader when he suffers a mechanical. It's not written in any rule book, but every rider knows it. It's part of the sport's soul. But Contador didn't wait. He didn't hesitate. He stood on the pedals and launched a fierce acceleration, taking Denis Menchov and Samuel Sanchez with him. While Schleck fumbled with his bike, Contador was already sprinting up the climb. By the time Schleck was rolling again, the damage was done. The gap had opened, and the yellow jersey slipped away with it. Contador won the stage, but the victory came with an asterisk in the eyes of fans. Clever? Yes. Within the rules? Technically. But honorable? Many didn't think so. The Chain-Gate controversy followed him long after the tour ended. Vuelta a España, 2015. Stage 2. Vincenzo Nibali, former Tour de France winner, Giro champion, and one of the most respected riders of his generation, crashed early in the stage. Determined not to lose precious time, he chased desperately, weaving through team cars with his Astana teammates. Then the helicopter camera caught it. Nibali reached out, grabbed the team car's window, and held on as the car accelerated. He wasn't just getting a push, he was being towed, pulled up the road at high speed in front of a global audience. It was shocking, blatant, a violation so obvious the commentators were speechless. The UCI didn't deliberate, they didn't negotiate, they disqualified him on the spot. No excuses, no appeals. A Grand Tour champion reduced to a headline of embarrassment, caught not by a commissaire on the roadside, but by a helicopter pilot tracking him from above. Tour de France, 2010, Stage 11. A textbook sprint stage, flat, fast, chaotic. Mark Cavendish was the unstoppable finisher, and Mark Renshaw was his trusted lead-out man, the rider whose job was to clear a path at 60 kilometers per hour. But on this day, things went off script. As the peloton roared toward the finish, Julian Dean leaned into Renshaw. Normal sprint contact, nothing unusual. But Renshaw snapped. He lowered his head and delivered 3 deliberate headbutts, trying to shove Dean off his line. Then he cut across Tyler Farrer, forcing him toward the barriers, disrupting the sprint entirely. Cavendish still won the stage, but the cameras told a different story. Within hours, the Tour jury expelled Renshaw, one of the rare times a rider was thrown out of the race not for doping, not for dangerous equipment, but for headbutting. It may have looked extreme, one official said later, but trust me, it could have been much worse. It was a reminder that in the heat of a sprint, with glory on the line and adrenaline surging, even the calmest professionals can cross a line they can't step back over. Tour de France, 2017, Stage 4. A blistering, chaotic sprint, the kind where the road narrows, the speed rises, and the margin for error shrinks to nothing. Mark Cavendish, one of the greatest sprinters of all time, was boxed in on the right side, searching desperately for a gap to launch his final kick. Peter Sagan, the reigning world champion and a rider known for his bike-handling wizardry, tried to squeeze through an impossibly tight space. And then came the moment that stopped the tour. There was contact, subtle at first, then violent. Cavendish was pushed toward the barriers with no room to escape. He clipped the fencing, lost control, and was slammed to the ground at full speed. The crash was brutal. He slid across the tarmac, curled up in pain, clutching his shoulder, a shoulder that would later be confirmed broken. His tour was over in an instant. The image of Cavendish sitting on the road, dazed and disbelieving, became one of the most haunting visuals of that year's race. Sagan was disqualified hours later, the jury ruling that his movement was too dangerous for a sprint that intense. Fans debated the decision for months, but the damage, both physical and symbolic, had already been done. From the Cold War between Armstrong and Contador to Jakobsen's near-fatal crash in Poland to Brambilla and Rovni throwing punches mid-race, cycling has shown again and again that the boundary between fierce competition and outright disrespect is razor thin. These moments weren't random accidents. They were choices, born of ego, frustration, panic, rage, or pure desperation. Actions taken in seconds, captured forever by a dozen cameras, replayed millions of times around the world. Because in cycling, as in life, victory loses its meaning when respect is left broken on the side of the road. And the peloton never forgets.